Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well.
Doing good here, Jeremy. Thank you.
Great. Let's give a few minutes for people to sign on. We had a pretty good turnout for the registration, so we're excited about that. Linda and Carrie, hope you're doing well. Appreciate you logging in with us. Probably try to start like 2:02, 2:03, just give people a few minutes to log in and all that. I know Zoom always gives you trouble when you try to log in, at least it does me. So I'll give people a few minutes. And while we're waiting, if you would in the chat maybe put in what type of business you are, if you're retail or salon or restaurant, office, what type of business you are, that would help me as well. Let's wait one more minute, make sure nobody else is trying to log on. 2:03. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll watch the, here's somebody. I'll watch the waiting room and let people in as we go, but I'll be mindful of your time so we can get started. I appreciate you guys being so punctual. It's my pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Jeremy Murdoch. I'm a community development specialist with Downtown Strategies, which is a division of Retail Strategies, our larger company. And today we're going to talk about the importance of downtown storefront displays, not only how they're important for your business or your property, but the role that it plays in the entire downtown. And I think that's something that I want you to walk away from today, is that your little 25-foot wide or whatever it is storefront, while it's super important to you, it plays a big role into the whole downtown. So that's a big theme for today. I've been doing community development work my whole career for 15, 16 years now, working in communities just like Fillmore, smaller communities all around the country on downtown revitalization efforts. That's what our whole division of the company does. So there's a little bit of a delay, so it's throwing me off a little bit. Retail Strategies is a larger company, works around the country, working in the national retail world. We partner with communities around the country to recruit national retail brands to their communities, obviously on the highway corridors and commercial corridors. Our smaller division, Downtown Strategies, does the opposite. We work with small towns, downtowns all around the country, works with small business owners and property owners around the country to revitalize their downtown or develop strategies that will help them take their downtown from where it is now to that next level. So we are very much that kind of micro scale, looking at streetscapes and walkability of downtowns, the physical environments, tourism, promotion, all these types of things of how to make your downtown a vibrant space. And we've been working with Fillmore for about a year now on a variety of initiatives. And this is just another thing we're doing to try to help downtown. You have a beautiful downtown. Loved our trip there. And so this is just another outcome of that process. So the things that, at least my goals for today, I want you to walk away with three main themes. One is how your storefront impacts the entire success of the success of the entire downtown and the vibrancy of downtown. I want to give you some just basic tips for good storefront display design. In a lot of the communities we work with, something that we see a lot is the downtown storefronts. A lot of them are underutilized or not utilized at all. We see the need to activate those display spaces in the storefronts. But when you're looking for resources related to that, a lot of the material that's out there is this really theoretical, really deep dive into how do you showcase the philosophy of your business through your display, really just really deep type things. And I felt like there was a need for, because I know how a lot of you're busy running your business. It's like, yeah, I see the need for this, but just tell me what to do. Tell me some creative things to do. Give me some things I can copy, those types of things. So that's what this is really designed to do. It's not designed to be this philosophical deep dive into the theory of storefront display. It's really to give you some basic tips on how to activate your storefront, how to lay out your storefront display, and give you some easy to implement and copy ideas for your display space. So this is not the real deep dive. It's really practical. You have a lot of imagery and photos. Hopefully I give you some things that you can copy or model or just give you some inspiration. So that's my goal for our time together today. So when we look at a downtown district, I love this photograph. It usually gets pretty good reaction of people agreeing that this is a pretty vibrant downtown. I don't think anybody would argue if every downtown looked like this, full of people, full of activity. I think it's an attractive space. And a lot of people look at it, it's like, okay, we can never become that, but, and then there's all these things that come after that. And my response to that is, yes, I think this is a beautiful, vibrant downtown. There's a lot going on here, and it might see, was it not? All right, it's not progressing. Right, let me reshare here. Okay, so you didn't get all my other. I had some other stuff I was going through, so sorry about that. Um, so thanks for letting me know you weren't seeing the transitions. Um, but when you really take some time and break down what is going on in this image, it's just a lot of different layers that have been implemented over time, from the street trees, the brick sidewalks, the attractive awnings, all the little details like the potted plants and outdoor seating, sandwich board signs, all those types of things. It's just a lot of different layers that have happened over time. So you can start with wherever you are now, and as you add layers, this way, it begins to add that vibrancy, and it becomes more and more vibrant over time. So to me, it's all about identifying where are we now, what are all the different layers that could be included, and just add those over time. And these are progressing, right? You're seeing a different image now. You're seeing kind of a black. Okay, it says comparison at the top. Is that what we're seeing? Okay, double checking. And so just comparing these images on the left, if you really look at the foundation, they're very similar. They're looking at brick sidewalks, streets that are in good condition, street trees, nice benches, trash receptacles, decorative street lights. The same public infrastructure. It's in place on the bottom image, but what's missing is that private sector collaboration and investment. It's the activation that comes from the business and property owners themselves. So the public, the city, the government, the community development organizations like a Main Street or a chamber or a tourism organization, they play a role in creating the foundation through infrastructure, beautification efforts like the street trees and things like that. But it also needs that balance of the private sector getting involved, of adding the potted plants and the flags and the outdoor signage, outdoor seating, those types of things. That's where the life comes from. So that's where I want you to see that each little storefront along this street can play a role in really activating that downtown. The government plays a role in laying out that foundation, and the private sector really brings that life to it. And in Fillmore, I feel like you guys over time have a beautiful streetscape with this beautiful foundation with the street trees and just the general environment downtown. We're just trying to get more life on those sidewalks. And when you ask yourself of which one of these do you think is going to be more successful for your business and attract more people and things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how each little storefront can do their part. And I like this image because these are two storefronts. They're in the same building. They're literally side by side from each other, have the exact same architecture, the exact same details, but they've been handled in completely different ways. Obviously, one is a retailer, one is a more service sector attorney, so they don't have the same needs as far as the storefront go. But when you talk about the environment downtown and the experience for a visitor or a customer, the one on the left just gives that warm, welcoming, active feeling to it. Clear signage, you have color, the few little potted plants and props, nothing overboard and extravagant, but it gives a totally different feeling than the one on the right. And for downtowns that have a lot of service sector businesses like attorneys and accountants and salons and things like that, it makes it very difficult for your retailers and restaurants when customers have to walk by 10 storefronts that you can't even tell if anything's going on inside just to get to theirs. So just by adding some little details to your storefront, even though you don't necessarily depend on window shopping type traffic, it can really help out your neighboring businesses just to activate the downtown area. So each little storefront plays a role in this. And the more layers that we can add, the more vibrant the downtown is going to appear. So when we really talk about your storefront itself, that is your chance to make a good first impression on a visitor. It might be one of your customers, or it might just be somebody visiting the downtown area, but you play a role in what that impression is. I do this for a living. I go to probably 20 downtowns a year across the country, and I'm immediately forming an opinion of that downtown as soon as we drive in based on these types of things. So with a storefront, I mean, you have about 4 seconds to grab somebody's attention. Um, so if you only have that limited amount of time, things need to be very easy to understand, very simple, very orderly. And in those 4 seconds, you're trying to tell them who you are through signage and very clear messaging about what your business is. They need to get some sort of clue as to what type of business you are. Are you a boutique? Are you a restaurant? Are you an attorney's office? Whatever that might be. If you are more in the retail side, a sample of your merchandise, you don't have to show them everything that you offer. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You don't have to cram everything in there, but just a sample. I mean, are you a clothing store? Are you an antique store? Are you home decor or gift shop? Give them a sample. Through your signage and your sample of merchandise and display, they should be able to get a clue as to your style. I mean, are you very traditional? Is it very artsy and eclectic type mix? Just a clue. And then you need to be able to invite customers in. They need to know exactly where the entrance is. Know how you need to be funneling people into your business and make it easy for them to find um, how to get in there and spend some money. So you have to do all these things very quickly. So we can't bombard them with a ton of information. It needs to be very simple, orderly, and attractive. And so, as an example of how you are telling your story through your storefront to people, looking at these three, all three of these are coffee shops. Okay, they're all three have basically the same product, some sort of food, some sort of coffee, flavored water. But they go about that in three totally different ways, I feel like. So as you look at those images, you're going to form a very different opinion about each one of these businesses. You're making, even just from these outside views, we have no idea what the interior is like, but just from your first impression, you're making snap judgments about what to expect on the interior, what to expect as far as the types of food and drinks and stuff that are offered, what your experience is going to be like, probably even maybe the dress and interaction of the staff, what that experience is going to be like. And you can, it's 1, 2, and 3, so you can hold up fingers in your camera, or you can put it in the chat. Which one do you of these three? Which one do you think you're going to pay $1.25 for your cup of coffee? It's your kind of, hey, we're getting a $1.25 free refill cup of coffee, just based on what you see in the storefront. 1, 2, or 3. One, you're getting your little diner cup of coffee, $1.25, $1.50 cup of coffee. Which one do you think is going to be that $6, $7 cup of coffee? Yeah, and I feel like that one on the right, to me, just from the font they use, from how everything is very structured, everything's lined up, very centered, very simple, modern font. Even the furniture they have out front is very modern. So I'm making a judgment of what that's going to be like on the inside. Which one do you think, 1, 2, or 3, is most likely to have a big, fluffy, comfy couch inside to be able to sit on and read a book? Yeah, I agree. Number 2, even their name of their business is Once Upon a Tart. Talking about a storytelling. I feel like from the lighting and the wood in the storefront, the little pastries and things, even their little furniture they have out front, they're trying to display this really warm, welcoming kind of homey feel to it. That you can sit on a big fluffy couch, have a cup of coffee, and read a book. So, just based on their storefronts, they are telling us a lot about their business, or the lack of effort they put into their storefront, as in number 1, tells us a lot as well. So people are making snap judgments about your business and your downtown just on these initial impressions. So we're going to get into this. And for you, I have 9 tips for activating your storefront. Now you may be saying, Jeremy, why not 10? And my response to that is 10 is way too many. So we had to stop at 9. I couldn't go all the way to 10. That's way too many to remember. So we're just going to do 9. And some of these are very simple. It's not rocket science, but it's things that we see constantly as we're working in different communities. They're just reoccurring themes that I feel like need to be addressed. So number 1 should be common sense, but it's things we see all the time. Just keep up with the basics. No broken windows, peeling paint, graffiti, trash, all these type things. Now, I realize that some of you do not own the building that you're in. You're leasing it. But trying to work with your landlord to get some of these repairs. And look, at the end of the day, people assume that it's your place. So if they see the peeling paint and those types of things, that goes on your reputation, not necessarily the property owner. Is that fair? Not really, but that's the reality of it. So if it comes down to it and it costs you $40 to get a gallon of paint and paint your own storefront, I think that it's a worthy investment there, because when we walk around and we see these types of things, the peeling paint, the stained ceiling, the dirty windows, and the junk and trash just piled up in the storefront, that not only reflects on you and your business, it reflects on the whole downtown. So just keeping up with the basics as best you can goes a long way. And we tell that for downtowns too. I mean, sometimes just pressure washing the sidewalk goes a long way. It doesn't have to be a big $100,000 streetscape project. It could be as simple as just freshen up with a gallon of paint and some pressure washing. So that's the first one. So I'm starting off giving you a softball here. Number two, be transparent. As you're walking down the sidewalk in a downtown, when you're going down the sidewalk and you can't see into any of the buildings and any of the businesses, it gives you a sense that it's not safe because you can't see what's going on. You can't see other people and activity. It gives a negative experience. So when you have tinted glass, mirrored glass, curtains or blinds, we see a lot of just oversized ads plastered in the window so that you can't see inside the windows. That gives a negative impression for your storefront as well as the whole downtown. So allowing people to see inside the space goes a long way to creating a good environment downtown. And if you need some sort of privacy, or if the sun is really an issue in the afternoons and you need some shade, I understand that, but at least activate that display space, that 18 inches or 2 feet of space at the window. If you could at least activate that space with something and then have some sort of barrier for yourself, that would go a long way. So looking at these examples that we see a lot, to where you cannot see in the buildings. And when you have just storefront after storefront after storefront that looks like this, it gives the impression that your downtown is just dead. Now, there may be 20 employees inside this title insurance business, but we can't see that. And you talk about restaurants, we see this a lot where they plaster the windows with pictures of their food. And I can guarantee you the best advertisement for a restaurant is be able to see it full of people and people in there. That's much better advertisement for your restaurant than just seeing pictures of your food. So looking at alternatives to this, here's another restaurant that simple signage, transparent storefront we can see inside, clear entry, and all that. Has a very different impression. And so these are examples if you need some sort of barrier. I mean, we see this a lot with dance studios, yoga studios that won't necessarily want people seeing inside to the classes, or if you're an office space and you want some sort of privacy. This is what I'm talking about of using, they built this little panel that they just hand painted. They draped this little sheet and have these little decorative things in front of it. These are just ribbon hanging down. I don't love this, but they have the curtains, but at least they activated that storefront display. So these are just ways that you can create a barrier to give you some privacy, but at least it's adding something to the street and to the storefront itself. And this is bottom left is an example of, I think it's a real estate office. So they don't need walk by traffic and window shopping, but you can see inside, the lighting is nice. They've done a few little things on the sidewalk to create a really warm environment for their storefront, which then expands to the whole downtown. So obviously a lot of the examples I'm showing are more retail related, but I'm hoping you can see how these principles apply to any type of business. And instead of a mannequin, maybe it's a piece of art or a photograph or something. And we're going to actually go through some of that in different examples. But keep in mind that even if you're seeing mannequins and things, even if you're in an attorney's office, there's ways you can use these principles to activate your storefront. So number 3, and this is a big one because we see this a lot. Remove the clutter. Again, you have 3 or 4 seconds to get people's attention, or for people to form an opinion of your space and your downtown. So it's that difference of that messy and disorganized display versus a curated and intentionally designed display. You can, first of all, you don't have to show all of your merchandise in that little space. You're not trying to show them everything you sell. You're just trying to give a sample. But there are ways to display a lot of items in an orderly, intentional way. So I think the biggest advice is to keep it simple and just fewer items, the better. But there are ways to show multiple items in an appropriate way. So we see this a lot to where there's just a ton of things and items crammed into that space. This one on the right is actually a really nice toy store, candy shop in a really nice downtown, but their storefront display is just unorganized and chaotic. So there's ways to display a lot of items in a more appropriate way. You see the one on the top left, they gave a sample of their merchandise. Obviously, there's some sort of home goods, decor type business. So anything from furniture to candles and things like that. They've shown a variety and a mix of merchandise. They didn't cram it full of 1,000 items. They used different heights and things to display the items. And they pulled things with similar colors to pull everything together. So it wasn't this jumbled mess of things. They used color to really tie everything together. The one in the middle used a big bench as kind of that focal point, added some smalls around it in different levels and things to make it interesting. But they used the color red to start to tie these different things together. Same thing on the right. This is a store that has a lot of different variety. They gave you a small sample in the storefront, but they're allowing you to see into the store to see what else they offer. So you can see it's a wide variety, but the storefront is very orderly and clean. This one, I think home furnishing stores and things like that, I think have a hard time because they have such a wide mix of merchandise. They feel like they need to show everything. I think this one did a pretty good job of using large items as the focal point, stacking smaller things around it to give a good mix, but a good composition. This one on the bottom left is not great. And a lot of times I'll talk to people about good, better, best. And here's the best case scenario. Here's something that may be a little bit not quite that. And here's the last on the scale. So this is the good of the good, better, best. This is obviously kind of a antique kind of trinket store. But just by using this multi-layered shelf, it at least spread things out, got things on different levels, and they were just able to put different smaller items on each one of those shelves. Big focal point being this strange little thing here. Obviously, it's a very eclectic store and all that. So this isn't great, but it's better than just cramming everything you have into that window. So these are just different ways to handle a wide variety of merchandise. I know if you have a type store that has a lot of small things, it's hard to fill up that whole space with that. So there's just some different techniques for doing that. And we're going to talk about composition things a little bit that'll apply to a wide variety of things. So number 4 is you've got to tell them who you are. Clearly display your business name. That information in your storefront needs to be very clear and simple. You don't have to bombard them with, you don't have to put your whole business plan in your window. Just who you are, give them a clue about what type of business you are, and don't think you have to just tell them everything about your business in that signage in that window. So here's some examples of, I feel like, what are oversized signs, just a little bit out of scale for the downtown area. I mean, people are walking by. You don't necessarily have to scream at them. And we don't have to tell them everything that you do. This one on the right, you know, if I feel like they are screaming at me with all this information on here, I feel like this is the equivalent of texting in all caps. So you're just trying to bombard me with information. And the reality is nobody's going to sit there and read all of this. So trying to tell them who you are in a very simple, appropriate way. Simple signage, clear storefronts, not plastered with all these different signs and words and posters and things. You know, simple sign that says hair in it, so I immediately know you're a salon. Skinny's repair shop. Okay, is that a body shop? What is that? I'm not sure. Well, their signage clearly says phone and computer repair. So this is a non-retail business with really good signage, simple, to the point, attractive color palette and storefront. Not doing a lot with the storefront display window, but you can at least see inside. This one, you immediately know that it's a boutique. You know from the graphic and the little horse head that it's probably a Western wear and the cactus in the pot. You immediately know it's a Western wear type boutique. I immediately know what type of business this is. Sign might be a little bit big, but they don't have it plastered all over the storefront. Then the example from the title page. Number 5 probably could have been combined with number 4, but I felt like it's such an important piece that we see over and over again. So I pulled it out as a separate thing, is show that you're open for business. So this is all about business hours. We need to have your business hours clearly displayed, and we need to have some sort of consistent hours so it's predictable. There's nothing more frustrating for a customer to look up your hours, see that you're open 8 to 6, 9 to 6. Then I come on my lunch break and you're closed, or I come at 5 and you're already closed. So having consistent and predictable hours are a big thing. I'm going to talk about in the next slide that these handwritten, hey, call me and I'll meet you, or I should be back around 2. If there's an emergency that takes you away and it's just a last minute thing, that's fine. We see those handwritten signs as really long-term signage in a lot of cases. So we're trying to get away from that. And the other thing is that the downtown operates as a network and a district. It's just not you as a standalone business. People want to come to downtown and spend time at multiple locations. Sorry. So trying to coordinate with your other businesses downtown is a big deal. Trying to make sure the sidewalks don't roll up at 5 o'clock and everything closes at the same time. So trying to coordinate with the other businesses downtown is a big part of this, to have predictable, consistent hours for customers. Thinking about your target audience and their commute times. Sorry about that. I have a weak voice anyway, so it's starting to leave me. Commute times, thinking about your target audience for your community and your business. A lot of them are probably commuting to work. It might only be a 15, 20-minute commute. It might be an hour, but be mindful of that. And there's data and things that can give you a clue on that. So closing at 5 o'clock makes it impossible for almost anybody to get to you after they get off work, even if they're local. So just thinking about those types of things, thinking about, I know it's hard. You want to have a life outside of your business, and I totally get that. But think about maybe once a month having a extended hour event where everybody's open till 6 or 7, or at least being coordinated as a district once a month, twice a month, to give customers an opportunity to shop with you after 5 o'clock. Trying to do that on a consistent basis so people know what to expect. This on the left, I mean, this one's a little extreme, but we see this kind of thing all the time. All this information, it's like, what did it say? Please call to make sure that I'm here. You can reach me at this number. There's 2 different sets of business hours on the sticky notes and posters. So we got to get away from this kind of thing and be more consistent. See on the right, open daily 9 to 5. It's more than just a cup of coffee. Got the business name, open and close sign. Very simple, very clean, easy to understand, easy to follow. All right, so I'm going through quickly so far. This is the long section. I think this is probably what you're probably most interested in, because this is more the simple, easy to follow tips and things that you can copy later on, of talking about how do we lay out our storefront display. Some of you probably don't care about doing this type of thing. You don't like this more creative side thing. You just want to run your business and do your thing, but you want to know, okay, I realize it's important. What do I do? So that's what this section is dedicated to, of making it interesting. It doesn't matter if you're a retailer, a salon, an attorney's office, or if it's a vacant storefront. It needs to have an interesting storefront display in some way, activate it in some way. So we're gonna look at different examples of there. How do we make it interesting? By varying the different heights and depths of the items that you're displaying, using color to tie things together and make an interesting display. Thinking about eye level. When you think about the national retailers at the grocery store, they know that eye level is the premium space on the shelves, right? So they do a lot of things to get your attention at that eye level. If you need to call attention to whatever you're putting on display, you can add a backdrop. Again, we don't want to necessarily block all the views into the space. A backdrop can simplify the background for whatever you're showing. And if you don't have merchandise or if you don't know what to do, you can always use art, photographs, sculpture, pottery, whatever to display that. We know some communities that partner with their local arts council to do like an art and public places committee or something that will pair a local artist with storefronts so the artist can display their work in the storefront. That way the business owner or property owner doesn't even have to worry about it. So there's different things we can do to activate that space. So when we talk about composition, the main thing that we're going to see over and over again is we're going to think in threes. I'm going to give you a few things. I'll give you three things on that actually. So we're going to think in threes. The first of which being the rule of thirds. I don't know if we have any artists or architects or things like that on the call, but rule of thirds is something that's used constantly in photography, architecture, art, film. This may drive you nuts if you pay attention. Watch any TV show or movie, and very rarely is anything centered. Things are always on one of these thirds. So when I say rule of thirds, we're taking this space and dividing it into three spaces horizontally, three spaces vertically. And important things typically happen in these zones, along these lines, or where the lines cross. So you can see where they place people's faces are often on these, where they cross. Things are usually weighted in one way or the other. Titles weighted in this upper third. The brands are where the lines cross. I mean, this is just a guide. I mean, obviously, rules are made to be broken, but this can give you a guide of where do I start? I've got this space in my storefront display. Where do I start? Dividing it into this rule of thirds will help give you a guide of where to place things and how to arrange items in your space. So how does this apply to a storefront? Same thing. You can take your space, divide it into thirds, and that will give you a guide of where things could be. Looking at the other think three items, we have the rule of thirds. We're also going to think in triangles, which how many sides and points do triangles have? They have 3 sides and 3 points. So you can see how these items arranged from this group of baskets and purses, and this center mannequin creates a triangle. You can see these clusters of smaller items here create a triangle. So triangles are big, and clusters of 3. We have 3 mannequins, 3 little purses or baskets, 3 hats, 3 little items here. This is a way you can start to build your display of just thinking, okay, I need 3 items. How can I arrange these in some sort of arrangement? We're trying to create a focal point. Obviously, just the size of the mannequins compared to everything else, they are the focal point. Everything else is there to support them. Using colors and shapes, you can see how they used the blue kind of colored clothes on either side to frame this brighter white piece. So that stands out as the main to create this center triangle. They even have a blue hat in the middle here to create a triangle of color. You can see the clusters of 3 reddish orange items here. So you can use color to draw your eye around as well. Obviously, they vary the heights of different things. I think this would have been more dramatic and dynamic had they either raised one of the mannequins or lowered one to vary the heights even more. But nonetheless, they have items at different levels. Not everything's just on the same plane. In this case, they did add a backdrop. You can still see through it into the store, but that backdrop created a clean background for this composition. And so all these things I'm going to go through are trying to give you just basic layouts that you could copy, trying to give you photo examples. Obviously, you may not have dresses and furniture as your merchandise or what you want to show, but you can use these principles and just replace that. Maybe instead of this dress, it's just an antique door and 2 antique chairs just to give something interesting to look at. It doesn't have to be these items you see in the photo. You've got to figure out how does this apply to me in my business. So a basic layout would be just a basic pyramid. You can see the 3 items create a triangle and a pyramid. This one as well. We can do an inverted pyramid. This one's nothing special, but I felt like this was something that anybody, retail or not, could do, just using tool or whatever this fabric is to create simple trees. And so they have 3 of them, just varying heights, and these little snowball things you can probably buy for $1, and you probably have a less than $10, less than $15 display for winter, and that's done and activated. Obviously, inverted pyramid with the mannequins. Once you have that basic principle of the pyramid, then you can add to that. So this is basically the center is that basic pyramid I showed you before. And then you start adding us another couple of items to create a secondary triangle. So you can see this. I like this because it actually broke the background into thirds, like we talked about. And then they have that basic pyramid in the middle with secondary elements off to the side to create smaller triangles. Same thing here. They hung things from the ceiling. So don't forget about that. You don't necessarily have to just go from the ground up. You can hang things from the ceiling to create these shapes as well. So you can see there's kind of a basic triangle in the middle. Then they added items to each side to start to do that. In both these examples, the color palette helped tie everything together. This kind of whitish, grayish, beige color palette. There's different items here from looks like a teddy bear to children's clothing, but the color palette pulled everything together. Same thing with the red and pink color palette. You've got anything from boots to candy to clothing, but the color palette pulled all those things together. You can shift things to one side or other to line up on that left third, have a bigger item that's balanced out with a smaller item to the right. This I thought was an interesting display of how do we display a lot of small items that might not be related in a way that's not just chaotic. And to me, in my opinion, although this is pretty extravagant because that's a pretty big display, and obviously they put them in the shape of a tree for the holiday season. But even if these boxes were just in a grid or in a pyramid shape or something, the boxes create these clean boundaries and frames for these unrelated items. So that gives the consistency and the order to what would be a very chaotic display. Everything being a shade of green, I think makes everything simple. So all these items can be tied together visually. Starting with a main focal point in the middle, and then either hanging or setting smaller things around it. Here's something that could be a non-retail thing, is a ladder shelf, or like I said, an antique door, something large in the middle, having triangles of smaller things around it. Obviously, they hung filler things around it. Bright, vibrant color palette, but a cohesive one, coordinated one, pulls everything together. This is one that anybody could do as well. This is probably less than $10. You have the quote that's really the focal point, and this these simple wrapped boxes and triangle shapes around them, and to create this nice little holiday storefront display. Then kind of the zigzag pattern there is putting things at different heights. Very simple, but it's interesting just by having things at different heights to go up and down. So this is nothing extravagant, just something that can add some visual interest there. Then again, not to forget that you can hang things to fill in the space. So if you have something that a lot of items that are really small, if you're non-retail, obviously this is a pretty intricate paper cutting, but I've seen on Instagram and Pinterest and things ways to do very simple silhouettes that almost anybody could do in this similar fashion. Hanging things from the top would give you a pretty dynamic display for whatever season you chose. Very low cost, fairly simple things that you could do. Obviously, in this one has a lot of different small items, but they use the little pennant flag things on the top to add some more interest in that upper third. Then just another example of hanging items around to really fill in the space. And then finally, having one statement item, whether that's a piece of art, merchandise, whatever it might be, and just having a background behind it, some sort of backdrop to really make that stand out. So this one with these, is it macrame or whatever, I forget what that's called, has some nice texture and color just as a backdrop for this one simple item. This is something that almost anybody could make. It's a handmade little thing for Valentine's Day, and just that backdrop makes that pop out even more because it gives it a simple background for that item. So let's see this stuff in action. gave you kind of the principles that you could follow, different ideas of things that you could do for layout and composition. Let's see how this plays out in the real world. I feel like this is a pretty well done display, and this store does a really good job throughout the year. And so let's go through our checklist. Rule of thirds, they definitely use that. You can see items are lined up on those thirds. Important items like the heads of the mannequins and things are placed where they cross for the most part. They definitely use triangles and clusters of 3 with everything. Obviously, the mannequins make a triangle, but you can see the filler little floral arrangements they added actually make smaller triangles to pull things together. They definitely put things at different heights, not just the mannequins, but the other filler items create different heights. That adds interest to the display. And then color is something you may not really notice at first, but the color palette they chose, obviously it's very fall, earth tones color palette, so it's seasonal, but the colors they chose creates a balanced storefront. So you have the reddish color on both sides. To me, the reddish color also ties in the woodwork in the building itself. You have the little pops of blue on both sides that balances that out. If it was me, I probably would have added a third blue element somewhere to make a triangle across the 2 sides. And then the beige kind of cream color from the clothing and the floral arrangements start to balance that out on both sides. So they use color. That's something that you may not notice right up front, but that's something that just in your psyche makes this an attractive and balanced storefront. So just a lot of different ideas here of using the brown backdrop and the little props to really, the wood here, all these have the same brown color, creates a frame. For the other items, everything's placed at different levels. You have a mixture of small and larger items. This is something that could be retail or not. This is obviously a summer themed display. It's really simple. Daisies are placed at that lower third, and where those cross, the little letters and words make up that upper third, and they use color to tie everything together. This one down here, again, I think varying the heights of the mannequins would have made it a little bit more interesting, but they placed the yellow on the thirds, floor arrangements on that lower third to create a pretty balanced composition there. Then the other ones are just examples of pretty low cost things that you can do for a backdrop, for a filler, something to add something for the season, anything from these little puff balls to a little spring flower display, little miniature beach balls. These are the little construction paper chains that you made in elementary school. Different things you can do to just add a pop of color, add something seasonal that doesn't cost a lot of money. Same thing here. You can see the focal points in pink on either side. They just use balloons, a little balloon arch deal to tie them together. Obviously, that's only going to last you maybe a couple of weeks, but it's a pretty low cost, really dramatic thing you can use as filler and to visually tie all these things together. I tried not to use Fillmore examples just because I wanted to give you stuff from the outside, but I use this one all the time from the salon downtown, of a salon that doesn't necessarily need a storefront display for their business, but they just use maybe a vintage chair and some greenery to make that little triangle, and they've activated that storefront. You clearly know what kind of business it is. The yellow ties in with their branding. Immediately you know what type of business it is. Gives you something to look at on those 3 or 4 seconds as you're going down the sidewalk, and helps bridge the gap to other businesses. Other things like pom-poms, window paintings for spring and game day, just different ways that you can activate your storefront throughout the year. Using art, if you're a non-retail business, using art in some way. And it doesn't have to be some fine art painting from a local artist. You could get a big canvas, you could get a drop cloth from a hardware store, make a simple wooden frame to attach it to, and just paint a simple geometric pattern on it. And that could give you something for a season, just something very simple, very low cost, but something that will add some interest. This is actually a stationary store, but I felt like anybody could get vintage postcards or photographs or something and pin them up in a similar manner just to add something interesting in the storefront. And here's a little geometric pattern that you could do on any kind of paint. Almost anybody can do that. Just tape it off, paint by number in different sections, different colors, and you have a work of art that can go in your storefront. This is not ideal, some of these, because you can't see in the spaces, but looking at vacant storefronts, what can we do in the meantime until those are activated instead of them just being boarded up storefronts? We've seen it use window clings with historic photographs or photographs of famous people from that city, put those in the window. We've seen, this one, instead of just a blank white curtain, they had an image printed on it. So then when they pull their curtain down for shade in the afternoons, it's now a piece of art, not just a blank curtain. This community partnered with the local high school art program, and the high school students painted artwork on the boarded up windows. So having boarded up windows is not ideal, but that good, better, best. What can we do in the meantime? We can turn those into public art. This is one where instead of blocking the whole window, they use window cleans to just add a little pop of color. So that's better than it just being vacant. And this one added a quote, almost a mural type treatment to it. So you're looking at the artwork instead of the fact that it's an empty, vacant building. And this one is actually a shell of a building. It's just the facade. There's literally grass and rubble behind this. But they took that and actually printed, they have a really good branding campaign and logo for the community and all this. So they actually printed some branding and part of their campaign on these big banners. And now I'm paying attention to that as opposed to it being a shell of a building. I don't notice that. I notice the messaging and branding for the downtown and the community. So those are a lot of different ways to make an interesting storefront display. Went through composition, went through different low cost options for filler and backdrops and things, different ways that you can activate your storefront, no matter if you're a retailer, property owner, office, whatever type of business you have. Along with that, if we want you to activate your storefront, that's number one. Ideally, it wouldn't just sit there for years and years and years with the same thing in the windows. So ideally, we'd like to shift those out throughout the year. As a retailer, I mean, some people say even more than this, but I would say at least once a quarter, so then 2 or 3 times, or every 2 or 3 months, you're switching out your display in some way. I think for non-retail, I don't think it's just a huge burden to ask for maybe one per season. So summer, spring, summer, fall, winter, changing out 4 times a year just to stay relevant throughout the year. So that helps your whole image of your downtown as a whole. And don't just think about the typical holidays and seasons. You can also think about graduation, back to school, Mother's Day, those types of things that aren't just real traditional big holidays. So if you're looking for other ideas of things to do throughout the year. So obviously we could do a whole session on holiday displays. But I didn't include just tons of those because any quick Google search or Instagram or anything like that can give you tons of ideas for Christmas, holidays, fall, those types of things. I just wanted to point out the importance of doing something. And obviously just using colors, the fall colors and color palette can go a long way. This is Edward Jones Investments, so very much non-retail, but they got involved with the 4th of July and summer storefront design. Obviously, everybody gets excited about winter and holiday shopping season. Something as simple as just a little simple window painting can go a long way for a month or two. And obviously, this is an odd image in the bottom right. So I'm not telling you to install built-in bookcases in your storefront. But I wanted to point out how color can be a good way to do this. So you may not want to spend a lot of money on all these different props for 4th of July and all these different holidays. But if you just want to start collecting items of similar colors, go to Goodwill, go to thrift stores and find different props and different clothing and different items of similar colors. And you can have a whole display of nothing but green items around St. Patrick's Day. It doesn't have to be straight up 4-leaf clovers and leprechauns. It can just be a green color theme of different items that are interesting to look at. Same thing for different holidays like Valentine's Day. You may not want to go overboard with the hearts and flowers. You may want to have something that's a little more subtle, but just using items of similar colors can help give you an interesting display, and it doesn't have to just be in your face for whatever holiday that is. So that's why I included that image, just to show that just having items of a similar color can go a long way. So number 8 is let your life shine and let your light shine. So obviously this is a little bit deeper. This may require some outside expertise, might be a little bit more costly, but properly lighting your storefront is a big piece. Now, there's people that do that for a living of design lighting for storefronts. So you can get really in depth with that. I just want to point out the importance of having some sort of lighting in that storefront display space. We want that soft, warm light, not in your face, bright LED strip things. We're not looking like a gas station here. We want something soft and warm. And this is a big ask, I know, because everybody's aware of cost, energy costs, and all that. But leaving the storefront lights on, or the display lights on after hours, not your whole store or your whole building, but just that storefront display lights on, that's what really adds to the vibe and interest of downtown after hours. Even if you close up at 5, I mentioned earlier, I'd love for you to stay up and later and coordinate those hours with other people in the district. Even if you close up at 5, for your restaurants and other businesses that are open later, when a customer comes downtown and everything's dark and half of, 3/4 of downtown's dark, that does not help them in their business at all. Having that different light along the street helps add to that vibrancy after hours and give you the impression of a nightlife, even if that's not necessarily the case. It's hard to capture this in a photograph, but hopefully you can tell the difference. These are 2 different streets on the same downtown. This one has 3 or 4 different storefronts that after hours, everything's shut off. It's dark as night in each one of these storefronts. Gives a really dark experience when you're walking down the sidewalk. Kind of makes you feel unsafe. Whereas on another street, you have a mix of accountant, law firm, retail shop, furniture store. So very different types of businesses, but they all leave their storefront display lights on, and they're not quite as bright as this. It's very appropriate, but that gives a very different feeling as you're walking downtown. These other 2 examples, they're obviously closed. It's after hours, but just their storefront display lights are on, and that helps add to the experience of downtown. And it also gives you an opportunity for people that are waiting on their table at the restaurant next door or down the street. They can see what you have to offer, even though you're not open. So you're also thinking about what impression am I giving to customers that are here when I'm not here as a business owner. So this lets us see the quality of your space, the types of offerings you have. If you're not open, that might encourage me to come back later. Here's an example of these LED strip lights that I don't feel like are appropriate for downtown areas. We're looking for very soft, simple lighting. So number 9, the final point here, this really brings us back to where I started with that first streetscape image of activating the sidewalk. We talked a lot about the storefront display space. That's what most of this was about. But it's also important to activate that sidewalk. And Steve Malzahn is an architect that has a lot of great content on social media. He talks about adding gifts to the street. So adding things to the sidewalk that's your gift to the street and to the downtown area. And this is where it really starts to add life to the sidewalks, not just to the storefront space. And I mentioned it with the restaurant earlier. You can spend all sorts of money on social media promotion and signage and advertisements and things. There's no better ad for your business in your downtown than just people. People attract other people. So seeing people sitting outside dining, walking down the sidewalks, window shopping, that's the best advertisement you can have. So how can we create an environment that people want to visit and spend time in? So I don't have a ton of images here because we covered it so much at the beginning, but these first 2 at the top left, obviously attractive storefronts, nice awnings, simple signage, good lighting, but they just have these 2 simple planters, a little sandwich board sign. That's nothing extravagant, but that, when you take that and you add that to the person that's doing that next door and the person that's doing that down the street, that starts to compound down that block. And so just these simple little gestures go a long way to activating that sidewalk and bringing life to the downtown. I was in this little neighborhood in Virginia, and the whole street had these sidewalk signs. They're all a little bit, sandwich board signs. All of them were a little bit different. They're all handwritten, really nicely done. You could tell that a lot of attention was paid to that detail. And you could see these all down the sidewalk. You could tell that it was a vibrant space. Little things like balloons and potted plants just add life to that downtown area. Um, Outdoor dining, some things are very extravagant if you have the space for it, but it could also be just some little subtle, small scale thing. But when you see people outside, that attracts other people. So just the importance of providing those gifts to the street and trying to activate that sidewalk. So that brings us through all 9 tips. This is a refresher there of what they were. Just different tips. Hopefully, those are very common sense tips for activating your storefront. Shows you how important that is. The role that your storefront plays in the downtown area gives you some things that you might could copy and utilize in your business, whether you're retail or non-retail. With those, as far as inspiration, I really probably need to build this up even more, but I wanted to include a few things. Obviously, Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, just through simple searches, you can find all sorts of images to use as inspiration of things that you can copy. Storefrontmastery.com. Jaime Azureta has written a couple of books and has some different workshops and resources. If you wanted to get more in depth with, he's really big on getting into what's the philosophy of your business and the story of your business and how do you tell that through your storefront design. So if you want to get into that deeper level, he might be a good resource for you. Mannequin Mall had a lot of different, 100 Christmas storefront displays, 100 Halloween displays. They had some list on there that you could flip through. A lot of them are what you'd see in a big city, so really extravagant things that you'd have to have a master prop builder to do. But I pulled some images from there as well, and I tried to include images in this that I felt like were practical for almost anybody to do. You don't have to be a master set builder to do it. It could be simple things. And this examples, not trying to promote Amazon, obviously, and something designed for small business, but just examples of this is inexpensive little backdrops can be used, and just little things like that can be used as filler and really step up your storefront in an inexpensive way throughout the year. So going through, I know I threw a lot at you, went through that relatively quickly. We covered a lot of ground.